Explosive evidence continuing to come through from the portfolio ad hoc committee in Parliament that was established to investigate wide-ranging allegations on security matters that were first made by KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi on the 6th of July. The first witness to take the stand earlier in the week was Mkhwanazi himself, followed by the National Police Commissioner Fanny Masemula. Meanwhile, in a dramatic twist, the Special Investigating Unit seizing assets from the home of tender mogul Hangwani Maumela, while the South African Police Service raided the home of suspended Deputy Police Commissioner for Crime Detection, Shadrack Sibiya. The raid on Maumela's property follows evidence of 2 billion rand in irregular contracts at Tembisa Hospital. The first to raise the alarm on those irregularities was the now late whistleblower Babita Deokaran. The Sibiya raid, on the other hand, forms part of an investigation linked to the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry into alleged criminality, political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system. So lots to unpack in all of that. I'm joined by the Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, Nishan Bolton, and Babita Deokaran's family member, Ali Gule, and SIU spokesperson, Kaizer Kganyago, and public governance expert, Hlumelo Xaba, also joining the conversation. I do need to start with you, Nishan, because I do understand that you are pressed for time. So let me start off with the goings on at the ad hoc committee in Parliament and what we've been hearing from Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, as well as the responsibility or otherwise as far as the National Police Commissioner is concerned. Your overall impressions of how that process bodes for us cleaning up the security services once and for all, a long-standing project for us.
Thank you very much. I had been told we were going to talk about the SIU raids, but let me just say that what I find refreshing is the fact that parliamentarians seem to have found their voice in this process. We have long been missing the kind of robustness that is coming through this ad hoc committee, and I hope that becomes an entrenched culture. I think the second thing here is that it does reveal the extent of the dysfunctionality, the discord, the divisions amongst the leadership of the police in particular, but all across the criminal justice sector. And that is of huge concern, I suppose, or should be of huge concern for all South Africans.
All right, we'll come back to the ad hoc committee. Let's talk about those raids conducted by the SIU. They follow hot off the heels of the SIU revealing and tabling an interim report into the situation and procurement at the Tembisa Hospital, and Kaizer Kganyago is here to talk to it. But what we are seeing now more and more is that, as shocking and as disturbing as what the late Babita Deokaran had revealed, the picture of the fuller iceberg is actually much, much bigger. What did you make of the raids being undertaken and the assets being seized by the SIU in the last few days linked to that investigation?
Let me start off by saying that I think we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the SIU, to Kaizer, to Advocate Angie Mothibe and others. Not only did they release this report last week, but within a week acted on some of the content of that report. What this does is it starts to build a confidence in possibilities of prosecution. And I say that guardedly because this is only one step. The prosecutions is outside of the hand of the SIU, but I think it should send a message to the prosecution's authority that they will only begin to rebuild trust and confidence when we see people behind bars in orange overalls really paying for the most horrendous crimes. You know, Tulas, the point that I think is being missed is there's a lot of focus on the expensive cars. But what really is at stake here is that much of this money was given to these so-called crooks for not having delivered a single pen or paper. This was just money given to them, signed off from false purchase orders, and by people working within the system for delivering absolutely nothing. Money stolen from healthcare, from the poor, the most vulnerable in Tembisa. And if we listen to the Premier at that press conference, he said he thinks that what has happened in Tembisa is now happening across all health institutions in Gauteng. So this is only the tip of the iceberg in Tembisa and across Gauteng Health.
Lastly, Nishan, before I release you, is it good enough, though, that we keep saying we now have a fuller extent of the picture and lamenting, and you have strong words, and it's as if, each and every time this happens, the political leadership and those who lead in governance find new and better ways of tapping in and connecting with our sense of outrage as a society, but we find ourselves back here time and again?
No, it's clearly not good enough. But I don't think any politician who wants to be re-elected is going to think that they can dupe the public in the way that they have been. When we see politicians in photographs with these crooks the way in which they have been, they must know that there will be consequences at the ballot box for them, and by implication, hopefully legal and criminal implications as well.
All right, I've got to release you. I do understand that you have other commitments, but thank you for making the time to join in, albeit briefly. That is the Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, Nishan Bolton. Let's bring back the conversation in studio. Let's start at the beginning. Kaiser Kganyago, the SIU initially tabling an interim report, and then in the last few days, we saw that raid at Hangwani Maumela's property and residence, and that seizure of assets. Tell me how that fits in with the interim report. You did mention what you called the Maumela Syndicate in relation to Tembisa Hospital. Is that a byproduct, a direct product of the work that you are doing at Tembisa?
Thank you very much, Thulasizwe. And the answer is a big yes. If you remember, at the press conference on the 29th of September, we mentioned there that on that day at 9 o'clock, we had received an order, a preservation order from the Special Tribunal. That was a preservation order we were talking about. And at the time, it was saying we must preserve about 500 million of his assets. And then it was amended early this week to include another 400 million, which basically makes it 900 million of assets that we needed to preserve. But we were mindful of the fact that we had started prior to that with asset forfeiture unit having done the same on some of the properties. Therefore, we are doing a balancing act. What we're doing the whole 900 million so that if he challenges the AFU and then they release some of those properties, they would be on our preservation order. But
these are massive amounts that you're talking about here, Kaiser. 900 million rand around an individual. How does that even happen, that you would have a preservation order for that much, and you're talking about an individual that has not really had a profile as one of the wealthiest people in our country?
Yeah, our investigation came to a point where it indicated that his syndicate alone benefited just almost 900 million rand out of Tembisa. And you must remember, this was an orchestrated process where all of these transactions were not a tender, because sometimes people don't understand. There was no tender. It was all the transactions that were below 500 million, and they were done with a three-code system.
500,000?
500,000,
yes.
And they were done in a three-code system, and they manipulated the system such that only their companies were bidding against each other. And they did so many of them to reach 2 billion rand.
Yeah. So I'll come back to you in a moment for you to talk to us about the preservation order and what it enables you to do in relation to the investigations. But I do want to bring in Ali Gule into the conversation. Ali, so much of the conversation has been about the vindication of Babita Deokaran. Does the family feel that she's been vindicated, and is that vindication to the full extent, or is there still more vindication that can be expected, that you do expect as a family?
You know, this is not only the vindication for the family, but it's the victory for the ordinary people on the ground who are using that hospital. Mr. Bolton has pointed out the hospital, like many hospitals in the townships, is used by poor and unemployed. I'm happy now it has come out from the Premier that something that we have always suspected. This typifies what is happening in other hospitals as well. So the recent raid and seizure that we have seen this week is even giving us more hope. We're getting closer and closer to eventually establish who is the paymaster or paymasters that pay the hitmen on Babita. Because remember, until and unless those people are also exposed, there will be no justice for the family. It's not about what we have accumulated by Asset Forfeiture Unit and SIU, but more than that, the money that has been looted from the public facility is meant for ordinary people. 2 billion means another ambulance that cannot be purchased, or bed, longer queues at the hospital. If you have been on the ground at that hospital, you can see desperate patients trying to access health. And it's surprising and shocking that the enablers enable people to loot money that is meant for ordinary people to buy Lamborghinis and the assets and the properties that we have seen. It's a good thing. Once again, well done to SIU, well done to Asset Forfeiture Unit.
Hlumelo Xaba, let me bring you into the conversation as well. We saw this is one of the agencies at the SIU that kicked into gear, and it's been commended quite a lot recently for the work that they do. But taken as a whole picture, what we saw the SIU doing, the preservation order, and the interim report that they brought through, where does it leave us around the whole conversation around cleaning up governance, cleaning up procurement, and vindicating whistleblowers, including those people like Babita Deokaran, who did not live, to see this day of their vindication?
Good afternoon to you, Tula Sizwe, and to the viewers at home, and to my fellow panelists as well. Thank you much for having me this afternoon. Well, as a point of departure, I must say that what Mr. Kganyago just alluded to now is actually a substantiation of a project that I'm currently working on, which is titled The Maleficent Relationship Between State and Non-State Actors in South Africa's Supply Chain Management System, where I basically look into the complicity of state actors being government officials and non-state actors being people such as your Ket Matlalas, your Hangwani Maumelas that have been implicated here in manipulating the control systems within the supply chain management system. Because if you can look at where most of the corruption emanates from in the public sector, you will realize that it actually emanates from the procurement system, whereby, like I just alluded to now, the state actors are complicit in enabling the procurement processes or the internal controls when it comes to bidding for tenders or when it comes to giving contracts to certain individuals. And thereby doing that, they consequently allow these non-state actors, like the individuals I've mentioned now, to actually manipulate the government systems and all of that, which now leads to the widespread corruption, as well as the lack of service delivery, like we've seen in Tembisa Hospital and in many other instances. And I must say that what is happening at Tembisa Hospital is a sample of what is happening in many other government spheres and agencies, not only in the healthcare sector, like we've seen in Tembisa Hospital, but it's something that is happening in local government and municipalities. It's something that is happening in other sectors as well. But to answer your question, I think that what the SIU is doing now shows some form of responsiveness to the report that we saw last week, whereby we saw that Tembisa Hospital was defrauded of 2 billion rand, which is something that was extremely shocking, by the way, considering the state of Tembisa Hospital. And I think that to corroborate what you are saying, this is a vindication of people such as Yomphomo Foles, who were assassinated in Ekurhuleni as a result of some of the audits that they were probing in that municipality, and people like Babita Deokaran and many others as well that may be unknown, who risked their lives because they wanted to do the right thing within the public service, and also decided to actually or crack the whip or blow the whistle against these actors and rogue people that are within the public sector, inside government, and those that are outside government. It's just unfortunate that in South Africa today, you risk losing your life if you blow the whistle or if you speak against wrongdoing, whether you are within government or you are outside of government. So I do believe that the SIU is a very important unit within our government, or I would say criminal justice ecosystem, in ensuring that those who are actually implicated in such rogue elements do get brought to book. So I do believe that it's a step in the right direction, because we've seen other people also who have suffered the same fate, not only in this time. We remember with Edwin Sodi, who was also implicated in similar, I would say, cases where we saw his assets being forfeited and all of that. But I think
while you make that point and you raise that name of Edwin Sodi, what it does is that it takes us back to the long and sordid history of governance in some of these institutions. And then it makes me wonder, a question that was asked of the Provincial Commissioner of SAPS and KZN during his testimony in Parliament. He was asked, is the situation getting worse or getting better around these issues of corruption of this nature within the state and state institutions? And his answer was to say it's getting worse, and the reason he said that was that he says it's now about the involvement of syndicates. So let me put it to you this way. Talking about rampant, deep-seated corruption is one thing. We're now talking about criminality of the nature, such as what you're seeing. Kaiser Kganyago and the team at the SIU are talking criminal syndicates, organized crime. Why, when we've lived through so many episodes at which we should have drawn a line in the sand to say this far and no further? Why have we seemingly deteriorated to the point where we're no longer talking entrepreneurs, we're talking syndicates now that will kill if you get in their way?
Well, Tula Sizwe, the moment that we are in now is unprecedented. As a matter of fact, I've characterized it as sort of like a state capture 2.0, and some of my colleagues that are commentators of what is happening socially and in the public sphere also actually concur with this sentiment, because you would remember that during the so-called 9 wasted years, there was a form of state capture, but which was spearheaded and pioneered by big businessmen that were colluding with government officials. But now, I would say what I've characterized as state capture 2.0 involves hardcore criminals that have now captured the state by colluding with government officials, because you know, like I mentioned before, that what is currently happening now is actually a malfeasance of state and non-state actors trying to benefit or trying to use state resources to benefit themselves instead of benefit the public good. Because you will realize that majority of the things that are happening now, like I mentioned, majority of the irregularities and the corruption that is happening in the public sector mainly emanates from the procurement system, which then would make us question the fact that, is the tender system still applicable, and is the tender system something that is still viable considering the rampant corruption that has been happening? And I do believe what General Mkhwanazi said, that there is the perpetual decay that we see also is perpetual now, in that it even involves criminal syndicates who would kill and do anything in order to ensure that their lavish lifestyles are maintained. And it's something that we've been seeing long time ago happening. You'd remember that even the murder of Cindy Somagaqa, who was the former Secretary General of the ANC Youth League, emanated as a result of these syndicates and a result of this colluding between state actors and non-state actors in the public procurement system in South Africa. And there are many other cases, apart from the ones that I've mentioned now, whereby we have seen a lot of these rogue elements that have crept into the government and and as well as the public procurement system. And now I think it's up to the...
So sorry about that, Hlumelo. I want to bring in Kaiser Kganyago back into the conversation. So talk to me about, this is a preservation order. The assets that we saw, it's, what do they call it? A conspicuous display of, opulence, really. A lot of people commenting about the property itself, as well as the vehicles that were coming out that you were taking. It's a preservation order. What does that mean in your context as the SIU? Is it something we as South Africans should be cheering for and saying that it takes us a step closer to justice?
We are not doing what we are doing for people to cheer.
Yeah.
We are just following the law as it is. And what is happening here is we have now established what happened. We've got the evidence. We are now going to put this evidence to the tribunal so that we then terminate or cancel all of those contracts that were entered into. And the minute they are nullified, then all of these payments will be null and void. But we know that it will take time to reach that point. Therefore, we then go for a preservation order so that we keep these things and avoid them being sold or being donated to you or many other people, so that when we finish that process, which we have got to do in 60 days, we are able to find something that we can then sell and recover the money. Because at the end of it all, we need to recover. But one thing that I need to emphasize, this particular preservation order is groundbreaking in the sense that it went beyond what previous preservation orders said. Here, we're talking about freezing not only cars and houses, but we are freezing even bank accounts. We are freezing crypto accounts. We are freezing all the investment that these people might have done. And the order even goes further to say, each and every one of these respondents must declare the other things that we might not know about now, so that they are also freezed. Because we don't want a situation where we get a hollow judgment at the end of this process.
Yeah.
And this has gone further, and we applaud the special tribunal for having gone there, because each one of them must now fill in a form and say, these are the other things that we don't know about.
Where does it leave your investigation around Tembisa? I remember when you tabled the interim report, you were naming 3 major syndicates and saying that there are other almost quote-unquote sub-syndicates. Some of them you were not naming at that point. How close are we to seeing similar actions around people involved in those other syndicates?
We are very close. We have got 9 syndicates in all. 6 of them are smaller. And the 3, we have named the 2. And the other one, we are still engaging. But the team has met with this particular head of this syndicate. And there are still legal issues that needs to be dealt with. And once all of that is done, the person already knows, because we've met with the person who is in the 3rd syndicate, Syndicate X, and we will then go for all of them to make sure that all of these things are preserved. But we also went further because we didn't want, you know, in some instances before where maybe Asset Forfeiture does this on our behalf, and then they go and challenge Asset Forfeiture and they win in court, and then those assets have to be released. And we are saying, no, we are freezing them again as the SIU. When you release them there, we have got different evidence that we have provided to the courts, to the